Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating and honestly sobering look at how global friction operates on two totally different levels. We usually look at the world through either a telescope or a microscope, right? We're either focusing on these massive, sweeping geopolitical chess moves made by world leaders, or we're looking at the deeply personal, devastating impact those big macro-level tensions have on everyday people. Well, in this explainer, we're going to look at both. We'll start with the high stakes world of international diplomacy, and then we're going to zoom all the way in to see what actually happens when the pressure of global friction forces a single family apart.
Okay, let's dive right into our roadmap for today. We've got 1. Two tales of friction. 2. Sabotage and diplomacy. 3. The Hormuz leverage. 4. Forced to flee. And finally, 5. When politics hits home. We're intentionally zooming in from the absolute highest echelons of Middle Eastern statecraft straight down to a single bakery in South Africa.
Section 1. Two tales of friction, the macro and the micro. To really get what's happening in our world today, we have to see how international relations and domestic crises are fundamentally reshaping how we live. Section 2. Sabotage and diplomacy, the US, Israel, and Iran. So, to grasp all this current geopolitical friction, we really need to look at the incredibly complex push and pull of US-Iran negotiations. Recently, US Vice President J.D. Vance was actually on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he shed some light on the intense lobbying happening right now behind closed doors. He said, and I quote, "I see that there's a literal foreign influence campaign being funded to tank the very deal that I was pursuing." According to Vance, there is a highly funded, super discreet campaign actively trying to derail U.S. negotiations with Iran. He points to reports that certain elements within the Israeli government actually paid a former Trump campaign official to fund this whole effort. Vance claims that the people getting this money have been viciously attacking him just for trying to reach a negotiated settlement. What this shows us, brilliantly, really, is just how incredibly high the stakes are right now.
And, those factions aren't just international, they're very domestic. Analyst Cyrus Shayer from the Geneva Graduate Institute points out that Vance's statements reveal some deep, fundamental divisions right inside the U.S. establishment. On one side, you've got your old-fashioned conservatives pushing for aggressive, indefinite military campaigns. In the middle, you have Donald Trump, who Shayer describes as more of a tactical maneuver, right? He's focused on the optics of today. And then you've got J.D. Vance and his allies, who are actually pushing for a negotiated settlement and deal. Shayer also notes that Vance's position here might just be influenced by his own future presidential ambitions, kind of positioning himself as the ultimate dealmaker.
Let's look at how this builds over time, because U.S.-Israel policy alignment is definitely not static. According to Shayer's historical framing, we saw a period of maximum personal and policy alignment between Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, starting in 2025. By early 2026, both leaders strongly favored a literal regime change operation in Iran. But here is the crucial catch. A Haaretz investigation revealed that this extreme escalation was actually deeply contested. Inside Israel, only Netanyahu and the head of the Mossad favored it. They faced really stiff opposition from other key figures, including the head of military intelligence. And bringing us to the present, we're seeing growing pushback from U.S. officials and Israeli intelligence against this massive escalation.
Section 3. The Hormuz leverage, the 40-day war and global oil. So, why the major pushback against military escalation? Well, to answer that, we have to shift our focus to the tactical reality on the water.
Now, what's really interesting here is how the dynamic has completely flipped. Pre-war, the United States was heavily favored against Iran, both militarily and politically. It was a totally lopsided scale. But post-war, following what analysts are calling the 40-day war, that balance of power is suddenly evenly matched. Iran basically realized, hey, we can't match the U.S. ship for ship. So they changed the game by successfully deploying global leverage. And that leverage is the Strait of Hormuz. To put this into perspective, roughly 20% of the world's total global oil consumption passes through this single narrow waterway. By threatening this crucial economic choke point, Iran created a lever that doesn't just sting the U.S. in the Middle East, it hurts the United States economy globally. Cyrus Sharma points out that while Trump might escalate things in the short term to project strength, the massive economic and humanitarian pressures, along with Gulf Arab allies who absolutely do not want a regional conflict, will inevitably force an eventual return to the negotiating table. Neither side can currently just impose its will by force alone. Okay, so we've just spent all this time analyzing the grand chessboard, right? The presidents, prime ministers, global shipping lanes, billions of dollars in foreign influence. But geopolitics doesn't just happen in the halls of power.
It trickles down. It manifests in policies, in borders, and in societal pressures. So, we have to ask, what actually happens when this kind of friction hits the streets?
Section 4, Forced to Flee, Anti-Migrant Protests in South Africa. We're going to zoom all the way in now to look at the deeply human cost of border and migration friction. This is the story of Simon Schuer. Simon is a Kenyan migrant who moved to South Africa back in 2002. Over more than 2 decades, he built a life there. He opened a bakery. He had a family. He was just a guy trying to build a stable life for the people he loved. But then the political climate shifted practically overnight. Amidst intense anti-migrant protests, a mandate dropped, a June 30th deadline requiring foreigners to leave. Just imagine that sheer, sudden panic. Simon describes people running up and down, desperate for answers. The situation deteriorated so fast that the Kenyan embassy actually started making emergency calls, urging citizens who felt unsafe to just drop everything and evacuate immediately. And in the chaos of that sudden evacuation, Simon was hit with a brutal, bureaucratic reality. He said, "When we had to leave, I couldn't come with the family, because in this instance, it was only offered for us Kenyans to leave." Because his family members didn't qualify under those specific evacuation terms, the harsh, rigid lines of international borders came slicing right down through his living room. His only option was to leave completely alone.
Section 5. When politics hits home, the human cost. You know, it's so easy to just read about migration policies or geopolitical strategies on paper and see them as mere statistics. But this is what it looks like when politics hits home. The human cost is exacted in these moments of profound separation. Simon recalled the exact moment he had to leave, saying, he asked, "Daddy, when are you coming back?" I had no answer. I mean, just let that breathe for a second. He didn't know when or if he'd ever see his son again. Today, back in Kenya, Simon is holding on to the hope that he can rebuild his bakery and one day reunite his family. But right now, they're paying the ultimate price for political friction they had absolutely no hand in creating. We started this explainer looking at vice presidents, prime ministers, and the massive balance of global power in the Strait of Hormuz. And we ended it looking at a baker who had to leave his little boy behind at a border. They seem like totally different worlds, but they are driven by the exact same machinery of global friction. As these massive geopolitical power plays continue to reshape our map and rewrite our borders, we have to walk away asking ourselves, how much of the true cost of these policies is ultimately paid by ordinary people who are simply trying to build a life? Thank you so much for watching.